All right. So welcome everybody to Marketing During Turbulent Times. I know that things feel super uncertain right now. We've heard the word unprecedented thrown around a lot. And so one thing that I really want to make sure that I hit home before we get started, our purpose here today really isn't to scare anybody. We're not trying to amplify anybody's unease or discomfort with anything that's going on. What we're hoping to be able to accomplish is make folks feel like they're in the driver's seat as business leaders, give you cause for hope, give you the understanding that some things may well be within your control. My name is Eric Wolf. My co-presenter, Greg Bond, and I are the co-principals of a marketing agency called Astound. We've been at this since 2006, and we're going to go through a lot of the practices and philosophies today that helped a lot of our clients not only make it through the Great Recession, but actually end up in a better position than they were before they actually, before it ever even happened. So agenda, we're going to go through just a couple of really basic sort of introductory kinds of things. Hold on, wish I could just automatically admit people. Always with the doorbells. So our agenda is simple. We're going to go through some introductory material. We're going to talk about the math that makes marketing really shine. We're going to take a quick break for some Q&A. We found that in extended video meetings, it's good to take breaks. And then we're going to hit three topics. Number one, we're going to talk about aligning with the marketplace. We're going to talk about setting appropriate goals and how to track success. We're going to talk about budgeting. And then for anybody who is willing and able to stay on after all of that, we're going to, Greg and I are going to hang on, and we're going to do some Q&A for an extended period of time, open discussion, whatever makes you guys, we can talk about whatever you guys want, preferably marketing related, but I think that's typically marketing related. So the question on everybody's mind right now, what kind of marketing is going to be most effective when the world fully reopens after the pandemic, whenever that actually happens? This is the million-dollar question for most of you. You may or may not like our answer, but I'm going to start with a question of my own. Does anybody here know how to land an airplane? Are there any pilots in the group? No? I personally am not a pilot. I'm told that this is how you land an airplane, but this does not, in my book, look like any kind of successful landing. This is a very effective way, I believe, to get a plane on the ground. But when many of us, including myself, get on an airplane, getting on the ground isn't my goal. My goal is to actually get on the ground at some place in particular. I've never actually gotten on an airplane and said, I don't really know where we're going, but as long as we land somewhere, I'm going to be personally 100% satisfied. A good plane ride, a good plane trip requires a destination. It requires a flight plan, requires research, requires a willingness to improvise based on outside factors like the weather. It requires that we've got a pilot. It requires that we have a well-maintained aircraft. A great landing is way more complicated than this picture depicts. And so to kind of bring that home, if I were to ask a marketer, like let's say Greg, hey Greg, what sorts of initiatives are going to be effective outside of after coronavirus and this whole pandemic thing is over?
And most business owners, I think, would reply, whatever gets me a sale. Like, That would, what gets me a sale, Eric?
You may as well be asking us to land the airplane. It's a completely out of context um, question that ultimately needs to be answered. But our goal really isn't in this presentation to give you one size fits all kinds of answers to really complicated questions. Our goal is to show you how to create an effective business strategy and how to work that going forward, no matter what's going on outside. So marketing is not in any way an ambiguous, nebulous collection of keywords and catchphrases like search engine optimization and direct mail and email marketing and marketing automation and social media. Marketing is actually a process, and this is our version of that process. And so if you're curious about where we land the plane and where we can answer that question about tactics, it's in that little loop right at the end, all the way at the right. What we're trying to do is, especially in an environment like what we're in right now, is we're trying not to get buried in tactics and buried in reactionary stuff. Well, what if I just do this? What if I just do that? There's a real shopping mentality that tends to go on in marketing nowadays, where people say, "Oh, well, I heard I need search engine optimization. Let's go buy that." Or my vendor came to me with a deal on this thing that I could put my logo on. It wasn't really part of my plan, but I think that we should do that. I heard podcasting is fun. I'm going to go buy a microphone. So that doesn't work. Um, what we want to focus on today is really on a lot of the things that we're going to do in that big circle that are going to really make us successful. This is a discussion about marketing leadership and strategy. And if we nail that part down, we get that part right, you're going to find that the tactics come much more naturally than they used to. So Greg, I'm going to kick it over to you and um, talk about what makes marketing valuable.
So the thing with that makes marketing valuable, a lot of people like to skip past the process part, as Eric was touching on, because there's a lot of elements of marketing, especially in leadership positions, that make people uncomfortable. And so many of us just want to skip to the part where we land the plane versus the part where we're taking off and we have the jitters. So we understand. We know enough to know that asking for tactics isn't going to be enough to make your business successful. And so that's the thing we're actually going to try to avoid here. Just basically getting some professional woodworking tools won't make you a pro or a master carpenter. And buying sneakers doesn't make somebody Michael Jordan, even though you might feel like you could jump higher and run faster when you get them. So hopefully you could trust us to show you this better way as we work through this process, and know that when you walk away from this, you should feel like you're in a better position to understand what a marketing process needs to look like. And then you could go ahead and create your own. Marketing leadership requires expertise and collaboration, and too often it's pushed down to more remedial positions within the workplace. It's pushed to people who have often the time to do these things. Instead of it being treated as an integrated business process, we often put value or a little more value on the process of accounting, for example. So we pay CPAs pretty handsomely, and we understand that this is something that has to be done for our business to run correctly. But at the same time, you wouldn't talk to a CPA and just say, "Hey, can you make it look like I'm profitable?" Or maybe this year, "Can you make it look like I took heavy losses?" Like that wouldn't necessarily be the best way to approach your CPA. And that isn't to say that when your office manager or your sales admin is doing marketing that they're not competent. But if marketing in your workplace is treated as a lower priority, then it's not marketing's fault when you don't get the results that you were expecting from it. It just means that you didn't prioritize it as one of those business processes. And so that's the part where your business process is broken. It's not like marketing's fault, even though it's often easy and convenient to blame. The best way to baseline your marketing is to set objective measures. So just like you would do with your accounting and finance, and then you stick to them. That way, if you have success or failure, it's not just like an excuse to say it's marketing. You actually know what failed and what was successful and how to improve from those points. So it's a refinable process. And that's really what's important is getting a process going means that you end up having much more reliable data and information to make good business decisions based on.
And that's why the process is a series of circles, because we're always going around, we're always iterating, we're always improving. We don't have any set it and forget it types of plans in marketing nowadays. It's a business process that should always be refined, always be questioned, always be improved upon.
Yeah. And so we're not the ones for secret sauces and cheat codes. And if you honestly hear about those, it should stand out as a red flag. Because if marketing was that easy to basically have something that was subversively undercut and make you successful in the marketplace for no money when other people are spending millions of dollars and putting tons of resources and time behind these tasks, then everyone would be doing it, and then nobody would actually find success. So there's never really like a cheat or a way around doing the work. So one of the things that we like to measure ourselves against, and not just like we measure ourselves against this, these are basically the only two metrics that marketing can really hold itself to at a very high level. Eric, if you could go to the next slide. You could see here we have these acronyms, which we're going to get into some acronym soup, but hopefully I don't go too fast. If I am, just let me know. But it's the LTV and CAC. To us, these are basically the two sides of the equation. It's everything that leads up to the acquisition of a customer, and then everything that happens after that acquisition when you're generating revenue based on your customer relationship. So everything that happens at the beginning is the CAC, or the customer acquisition cost. And then everything that happens after the point of acquisition is your LTV, your lifetime value. What's important to remember is that the costs here should be very inclusive. It includes all fixed and variable costs that contribute to your marketing effort in the CAC. So your sales and everything else should be included in your acquisition cost. And then when we really know what these two numbers look like, what we could do is compare them. We could take the ratio of lifetime value to acquisition costs, and we know from all the businesses that have ever run that have found success that this number should be somewhere between 3 and 4 to 1. So you should be generating 3 and 4 times as much revenue as it costs to acquire a customer.
Not revenue, Greg, gross profit.
Gross profit, sorry. It's a lot easier to refer to the big number that everybody will latch on to. So when you're referring to gross profit, you're definitely going to be taking some of those costs out. You want to basically refer to the money that you're making. So that would be the lifetime value.
Yeah. So lifetime value is basically gross profit over the entire time that the customer is doing business with you. And that cost per acquisition, that's going to be everything that you spent on your Google ads that drive the leads. That includes the salary of your sales and marketing people. That includes any travel budget for visiting clients. That includes the commission that you pay your sales guy. All of that stuff gets built in here.
And then with the lifetime value, the reason we're looking at gross profit is because then it accounts for very large deviations in people's business structures. So if you're a pure software company, you're clearly going to have much larger margins due to your scalability. But if your business is more one-to-one, let's say getting more into IT or attorneys or something along those lines, then you're not going to have as large margins because you're not as scalable of a business. And so scalability clearly comes into play when it comes to lifetime value of a customer. So the big thing is if we take these two measures and we're looking at our long-term outlook from where we're at now the recession started in March, and it's likely to go on for a good amount of time. But really what we're looking to do is starting to plan for what this recovery needs to look like from a forecasting standpoint for our own business. And so if we gut sales and marketing in response to COVID, what ends up happening is we're making a decision not to invest in our long-term growth. And I want to be really clear about this point because this is marketing is a matter of priorities in a lot of businesses. And oftentimes marketing is made to be a lower priority. But what happens is if we're looking at marketing through the lens of lifetime value and customer acquisition costs, and we start to decrease our budget and our resources that are allocated towards marketing, what happens is we gain often short-term runway. So in the short term, we have a little more cash on hand for operations and other types of things. But long term, our runway begins to shrink because we're likely to decrease our lifetime value of our clientele because probably you're going to have higher turnover, maybe higher rates of loss, and you're not going to be able to do as much to retain those people that maybe you had been committed to previously. And then the other part that we end up losing efficiency on is your customer acquisition cost, because as you decrease the resources that are committed to acquiring a customer, then you no longer have the efficiency built in. Basically, it's like taking your whole house down, and then the next time you have to get that engine started, you have to rebuild the house, versus if you were just to like repo a couple parts in that house. So what happens is the customer acquisition cost starts to go way higher, and turning that ship around is very difficult. This is often why people blame marketing during these types of things, is because marketing's constantly getting kneecapped. It's getting undercut whenever it's convenient. And then you keep having to restart this engine of trying to gain efficiency and acquisition costs and rebuilding how much revenue you're generating from your clients, how much gross profit you're generating. So the goal of our process is to make this journey. I want to sit on this slide for a second because this is really what a marketing process is trying to make more efficient. If we better understand and identify our marketplace, we're going to make it to that next step and so on. So we're constantly journeying up this hill with each and every client or customer that you have, or user, in whatever case that may be. So we view the process of selling as a hill that needs to be climbed over and over with every prospect. Along the way, there are failure points where we can lose the battle to get up to the top and ultimately get those people to make a purchasing decision. If we select a wrong marketplace or misunderstand somebody's pain, we're going to be disqualified before we even get started. Even if we pick the right market, it's irrelevant if our targets don't know that we exist at the time that the need arises. So this is where they need to understand and match your value to something that they need. If the value prop makes sense, but it doesn't match with the problem a customer needs to solve, you're not going to make a sale. And even if we do the right thing all along the way, you could still lose the deal to another vendor who looks more appealing, maybe has a little more rapport in the marketplace. So climbing this hill is really difficult, and the goal of sales and marketing is to work together to make this climb a little more efficient. So this is where we would end up decreasing our acquisition costs. When we're climbing the hill, we succeed together and we fail together. So neither group could do this on our own. We need sales and marketing to align, and oftentimes they're aligned competitively within a business structure. It's marketing's job to reduce the friction and obstacles as sales attempts to be the Sherpa that gets people to the purchasing decision. And as we could see, like one of the things, everybody's always concentrating on the apex of a mountain, that purchasing decision point. That's why oftentimes in businesses, your closers are the people who are, getting all the shining stars and awards and things like that. These are often pretty amazing people, but really it's all the things that led up to that close that are comparably important that we often end up deprioritizing and de-emphasizing. We concentrate too much on that purchase decision point, and we don't prioritize the steps that went into that. So it becomes more difficult to close customers, and the acquisition process gets longer, more expensive, and more chaotic when we start to decrease the allocation for marketing. And
just to focus off the things that we could be doing that would be similarly helpful.
Yes, exactly. And so this is the areas where we can actually define our success. There's 4 possible marketing outcomes. We could help drive awareness so that people know that we exist. Oftentimes when it comes to small businesses and mid-sized businesses, this is one of the hardest things to do, because really what is occurring is there's a gap in knowledge between you and the marketplace that doesn't know that you are a solution. And then driving engagement. So basically, sales don't just happen on a whim. Oftentimes, especially in B2B, it's not like there's this enormous, let's call it split-second decision to just, yeah, I need this and therefore I'm going to get it. Sales takes a while. And so in the meantime, driving engagement means that you can build relationships that at the point that somebody sees your value, understands what it is, and that their need arises, that's when you're still there and top of mind, and they know that they could use you and rely on you in that moment. And that's where driving sales comes in. So do we align with these people's needs? Well, it's basically a matter of making more opportunities so that your people are aware that you exist, that you're staying in touch with them, and that finally when the need arises, that you're there to hold their hand through the purchase process. And then ultimately when they have purchased, this is where the lifetime value portion comes in, is driving retention, making people feel cared for throughout the entire process. Because sales and marketing doesn't end at the point that somebody makes their purchase. Really, that you want to continue to remarket to people who you already have, because this is the most efficient marketing there is. All the customers who already know who you exist, have seen your value and purchased from you already, are the people that are ultimately going to be the easiest to get more sales from. So driving retention and increasing your lifetime value in that 4th step. In the time of COVID, driving sales may not be the most possible portion of this. So we focus on other things like awareness, engagement, and retention during these hard times. That last one is huge because the sales and marketing are usually playing pivotal roles in customer retention. And so without the support, the churn will increase and lifetime value decreases. And that's one of the things that we can very efficiently maintain through a crisis. So the big thing is when the economy is down, maintaining and reinvesting in sales and marketing will pay dividends. And it will also create opportunities that leapfrog the rest of the marketplace, because a lot of people are going to pull those purse strings real tight right now. And this is the time that you're positioning yourself to grow market share. It's easy to win a race when everyone you're competing with has pulled over to the side of the road and decided that camping is the better way to bide their time. And so if you could keep moving through this time, you will end up in a much better position.
So we're going to take a short break in just a second, but when we come back, we're going to tackle 3 big topics. The first one is aligning your business with the marketplace, getting to a place where you're being market driven, understanding how to set good marketing objectives, and how to track the success. And then number 3, budgeting. Really what we want to focus on is addressing that really meaty part of the customer journey from the time um, where they're understanding who we are as a service provider to the point that they're making a purchase decision. So we're going to go ahead and just take a couple. Just warning, I'll be unmuting folks, and we're gonna see what happens here. But feel free to ask a couple of questions. Feel free to go and refill your coffee if you need to. Take a bio break. We'll start up again in 5 minutes, and I'm gonna unmute you guys now.
And if you don't feel like talking, you can also chat.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, you can throw something into the chat if you like.
Hey, guys, can you hear me? This is Ben.
Hi,
Hey,
Ben.
how's it going?
Hey, good. Hey, thanks for doing this. It's funny. What a funny time we're in right now. I got a question for you, Eric.
Yes, sir.
As budgets become thin, so I work for a marketing agency as well. As clients' budgets become thin for multiple reasons right now, we're being asked to present a budget so that then they can go kind of get the money, from wherever department or wherever they can squeeze from. Wondering if you guys have seen similar things, and if it looks like it might be covered in the next section talking about budget, but
yeah.
Like to understand some of the tactics you guys use to proactively get those budgets, as opposed to running on an annual budget that may have been thinned over the year.
Yeah, and we'll go through that, and then we can talk about it more at the end if you like. But what we try to do is, when a budget has to change, and some of that is obviously just part of the thing right now, because we're not saying that people need to just keep pouring all of their money into marketing, but as long as what you're doing is, as long as when you're adjusting the budget,
you can go
you're
on this,
adjusting expectations
right? Did you look at that?
Yeah,
in a good way.
It says right
That's
now,
helpful.
not accepting artist applications right now.
I'm sure we're probably too confused.
Oh, it says mute yourself. Did you mute it?
Eric, if you'd like to give me admin, I could help monitor this.
Oh. Here, let me.
There you go.
How do I do that? More. Make co-host. There you go.
Thanks.
Yeah, I couldn't see who was talking.
No worries. I'll get on top of that.
Any other questions while we're breaking? We'll start up again in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I set a timer.
Okay. On top of things.
What? Yeah, I would say was it Ben that asked the question?
It was Ben.
Nice. Was that for us? It's about maintaining objective measures, and so not just like we really dislike when people are pulling budget numbers randomly, because if you could stick to objective measures, we could tell people what we expect it to affect in terms of their acquisition cost and their lifetime value. So depending upon what parts of their marketing budget they need to adjust and where you're cutting, we could basically say this is the shortfall or whatever that we'd expect as a result of pulling this. So by running through a acquisition cost exercise and a lifetime value exercise, we'll know what those numbers are. We'll have buy-in on a model, because every business is going to need to create their own modeling for lifetime value and acquisition cost. And so when we start to pull those numbers up or down or whatever it happens to be, we could see how it'll affect your acquisition cost. So basically, once you decide a budget, you could see how many acquisitions that you'd forecast based on it. And so it's about realigning expectations based on whatever the budget is that they're pulling for relative to the budget that you might need if you want to hit a certain goal. So I think for us, it's about being forthright about what we can actually do with a given budget.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good answer. I appreciate that. I have some of our clients now are pulling on trade shows. Obviously, no one's touching anyone.
That's a good one to pull.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hospitality. Like if you
yeah,
have hospitality clients, it's like there's no reason to be committing to that.
correct, correct. Or a lot of B2B clients too are cutting some of that. So I'd like to maybe at the end talk about different tactics. We're, B2B trade show. We're obviously heading more digital for a lot of different tactics, but maybe at the end we can talk about that too.
Yes, and we'll have plenty of time. So our
Yeah.
time is up for the
All right.
break. Is everybody back and ready to go? I'm excited. I like this next section.
Yes. All right. So what we're going to start by talking about is how we align the business to the market, and what we believe in is essentially creating what's called a market-driven business, which doesn't mean that we allow the market to make all of our business decisions. Rather, it's basically we're making an assumption that as an internal organization, we actually don't know everything. Um, it's a hard thing to admit as a business leader, but we actually like to lean extensively on our customers because ultimately our job as marketers is to fix their pain. And so as we approach the process of creating a business strategy, there are a lot of things that we like to, start asking ourselves internally. And I think over the past few weeks, definitely we've been asking probably a lot more of these questions, even just in the natural way that we do things in our lives. But one of the best tools that we have when we're looking at these questions that we're asking ourselves, what's holding us back? Where are we not communicating effectively? Do we really understand what the market wants and needs from us right now? Have our marketing materials been usable for the people who we intend to use them? And where's the friction in the buying process? And we ask ourselves these questions, and it turns out that we don't actually have to come up with the answers. One of your best and really cheapest secret weapons as a business leader is actually market research. And it's a secret weapon. It's a way to ensure against failure. And it's the perfect way for us to align the things that we're trying to sell with the people who we're trying to get to buy them and the things that they want. And so meaningful marketing always begins with insights from real people.
So Eric, I would say this is like as close as we get to a secret sauce in this whole thing. Besides tethering budget and how we look at success and failure to solid metrics, getting some feedback from the marketplace is really what all major big enterprises and businesses do, and often small and mid-sized businesses overlook. This is like one of the biggest differentiators between those who have resources and those that don't, but there's honestly no reason that people that don't have that many resources can't do this stuff. It's not expensive. It's not terribly difficult. It's just a matter of going through the process and really getting over our own assumptions that we know our customers and what the marketplace wants more than anyone else. That's
Primarily,
really
we're
the
going to be
hardest
asking
thing.
you to call people on the phone.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. This is on me now. So we always like to get started with feedback from internal folks. The idea that being market-driven doesn't mean that we ignore our internal team. We actually start with the internal team because their expertise and perspective is crucial. It sets a starting spot. And while we want to avoid trying to answer all of our questions internally, they end up being a really good resource for what types of questions we need to be asking and what type of feedback we need to be getting answers for. We need to get the right feedback and we need to be asking the right questions. And so your internal team is really going to be the resource that you use for that. And what you'll often find when you go through these exercises is that with your internal team, there's a lot of disagreement. People have very different ideas, even among coworkers, about what your business is and how it delivers and everything else. And so you don't need to settle those disagreements there. You let the marketplace drive those. And so you see basically what these differences in opinions are, and you say, okay, how can we learn more so we can see how our customers see us relative to what you guys are saying? And so once we know where we're headed on the research, the next question that we'd want to do and look at is interviews often, because that way we can get their qualitative feedback, and then we could use something like a survey to verify and validate that en masse. So we get some feedback, we see what some sort of trends are, we pull those out, and then we put it into a survey form to see if we could basically come up with some sort of, what would that be called, confidence level in what those answers are. And so it's sometimes a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. Where do you want to start? Surveys point you in a direction, and then interviews give you the depth. And so it's just a matter of what you're needing at that time. Your internal stakeholders, they can help you frame your business issues and identify the questions. So you always start there, but beyond that, it depends on where you head in terms of, sometimes if it's simple, it may just be a survey. But if you really aren't sure what questions to ask and where to start, then the interviews is going to be the more likely candidate.
I find that when you talk about market research with folks, the first thing that they think of typically is surveys. And my thing is that at the end of the day, what a survey gives you is a number. X% of people said this. And if your question is one that can be answered with a number, then that's terrific. But if your question is more nebulous than that, then definitely start with interviews, because that's going to give you the context that you need to really understand the texture of what people are thinking about.
And most of the time, I would say, Eric, we start with interviews because for us, we listen to the feedback that we get from our clientele, but we also want to frame our questions in a way that starts with our customers. So you can call this customer outreach, you could call it an interview, you could call it a win-loss analysis. You may have heard a lot of different fancy terms for the research that's being done, but the most important part is getting actionable feedback. And I might just sit on this for a second while you all have a chance to read this slide, because this would be the type of questions that you'd want to ask, which is like, how was your experience in working with us? Very open-ended. Let people talk, let people go on whatever diatribe they need. And then you could start to transcribe these things and pull keywords and phrases and quotes out of it. And then what happens is, as you're having these internal dialogues with your coworkers and business associates, you're discussing everything in terms of what a customer said, not just like what I think.
And you're using their language.
And you get to use their words. It creates something that's very hard to, it's very similar to when you discuss how you feel about something. You can't disqualify somebody's feelings. Their feelings are their own. They get to say how they feel. And the same with customer quotes. Basically, you can't disqualify what a customer said. And so it creates a very objective way of holding everything up in a conversation that often in marketing could be quite nebulous and ethereal and very just philosophical. It doesn't have to be. This is how you start to make marketing more objective. So we don't believe that customers are always right. The spirit that is often referred to, but we do believe that customers know best about what they need and why they choose to hire, fire, buy, cancel the services and products that they shop for. That's where they get the final say. So these methods, they're pretty foolproof. Our team worked with a tech company who believed the most compelling aspect of their service was this 10% savings guarantee that they put on front and center on everything. But when we were speaking with their customers, you would hear nothing about this 10% savings guarantee from them. you would only hear about like the service that they provided, how they were experts in this industry, and the partnership and leadership that they provided. None of them actually cared about the savings guarantee, even though that was their leading message.
I guarantee that every time you do this, you're going to learn something about your business that you didn't know before.
And if there's anything about learning things about your business that you didn't know before, is that's always priceless. That's not like, that's something that's hard to attach a value to. And that's why we're telling you during this downtime, people have a lot of time on their hands. They have a lot of time to give you feedback. This is a great time to be requesting it. Qualitative research is primarily done through the tools like surveys, which are clearly invaluable. But the things that we want to reinforce with that is that surveys are numbers. They are not advice. They're not experiences. They're not feelings or reflections. So use the survey when it's a number. The other trick here is tools like SurveyMonkey. While they do cost money, and I know everybody's purse strings are tight, they do give you this ability to very easily build out surveys, and not just build the surveys. It depends on your product category and what service you offer, but they have built-in audiences that could help take those surveys so that you could get way more numbers quickly. Now, if you're a bigger business, getting those clients to interact with your surveys shouldn't be terribly difficult. But for smaller businesses that are often in like commoditized markets, a great place to find good feedback is going to be on those built-in audiences through SurveyMonkey.
So if you've ever taken any kind of business class, you've probably heard of a SWOT analysis. It's basically it's a 4-square chart, and because you can't do a business class without a 4-square chart. And we've got a box for strengths, a box for weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what we do is we sit down and we fill out all of the things that we're good at, that we're not good at, all the things that we're potentially excited about, and all the things that we're worried about. And the problem is that the SWOT analysis ends up being almost entirely, it's an inside-out document. It's entirely from your perspective as a business owner. And so we decided to go and improve the SWOT analysis. We call it a SWOT squared. And basically what it is we take all of our internal feedback, we take all of our external feedback, and we put it together into a single sheet. And so what we've done here is we've got the traditional strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Those are the orange triangles. And then the pink triangles that go right next to them are the customer's viewpoints on those exact same lines. And so what you think your strengths are, you align with what the customer really loves about you. The things that you think you're weak at, we align with the customer feedback on what they don't like and what they feel was not a good part of their experience. We take our opportunities for ourselves and we put them next to the things that our clients are excited about. We take the things that we're worried about, we put them next to the thing that our customers are worried about. And so what we get is this really easy to read understanding of all of the commonalities and disparities between where we think we are and where our customers think we are. And this example, this isn't anybody's real data. This is something we made up based on like a craft brewery type of example. But we actually did this for a whiskey bottler, and we found that this was really one of the most valuable things that we'd ever done on the account, because all the things that they thought about their customer and they had assumed, it turned out were completely incorrect. It turned out that a lot of the things that were valued internally were not really resonating externally. They had different things. And so this is really a very easy tool to put together and really get perspective on your market and all the places that you potentially could go. And I think that if you did this today in the time of COVID-19, these the bottom row of triangles would be really, really eye-opening.
Because they've probably changed recently. It's something that you can adjust to.
Absolutely.
And so getting that feedback at this time is, even if you have, or this is a good time to recalibrate based on where everybody's at, since so much has changed so fast.
So we're going to talk about OKRs and KPIs and what we mean by that. Andrew, I saw your message in the chat, and we're going to we can talk about that during Q&A if you like. So OKRs and KPIs, they are different. A KPI is a key performance indicator, and we've all heard the term. And really where the flaw is in KPIs and why we like to frame things in terms of OKRs, which I'll go through in a second, is that KPIs often miss the context. We say web traffic is a key performance indicator. And so web traffic went up 10%. I think that that's good. But what does that mean? What does that mean for my business if web traffic goes up? There's no context. There's no why. We just know that it's something that we look at and something that we find interesting. Objectives and key results is a framework that solves this really fundamental problem with goal setting because the context is built right in. And I'm going to show you how this works. So I have my objective, and my objective in this example is to increase revenue from existing clients for the next 12 months. And so that's what I want to do. That's the goal. This is where we're headed. This is me booking a flight to a destination. I'm going to be happy if we increase revenue from existing clients. So how do I know if I got there? What are the things that I can do on the way that are going to increase my chances of success? And so the key results that we've identified to put under this objective is, hey, if we achieve 85% client retention, we're going to be in a really great position to meet this objective. Because if our clients don't stick around, then obviously we are not in a good position to increase revenue from existing clients. We know that if we conduct win-loss interviews with 7 clients on a regular basis or over the course of X number of months, we know that we're going to be getting that feedback along the way. We know that we're going to be able to adjust our efforts based on the preferences of our customers. That increases our chances of success. If we suggest add-on services, we're helping. If people are opening our emails, that's helping. And so what we're saying is we want to hit a goal, and this is how we're going to measure success on the way, so that we can not only see whether we're getting there, we're going to see how many of these boxes are getting checked along the way. It's sort of like if you were to say, I want to graduate from college, that's not a goal that you can just set and boom, you're there. There are steps you need to take along the way. You've got to get your high school diploma. You need to apply to a college and get accepted. Very often there's a test you need to take. You need to choose a major. You need to get good grades. There's a lot of steps that are required to meet your objective of graduating from college. And this is just a way of tracking against that. We would be remiss to suggest that in a time like what we're dealing with right now with the pandemic, that, hey, it'd be really, really easy for us to put together this plan and no, things change. Our whole world has changed in the last 6 weeks. And so we need to understand that when we set these goals, if we had put together all of our OKRs in December, we find right now that a lot of them are out of date. That's okay. Things can be edited, things can be changed, things can be reprioritized. However, it's really helpful to still maintain a document like this to keep you grounded. Being grounded in a time like this and working a strategy is very, very helpful. It saves us from being reactionary, which is a real easy trap to fall into right now. This is a way to keep focused, even if the things that we're focusing on change based on external things that are happening in the world. We recommend, by the way, in this structure that you have no more than 5 key results for every objective. That keeps things manageable. And really, from a marketing perspective, you probably don't want to be managing more than 3 objectives at one time. So as we're looking at the hill and we're looking at the 4 outcomes that we discussed earlier, what we're looking to do is we want to match up our OKRs with the correct outcomes. And so we don't want to say that we're going to drive retention, but then put all of our budget into, say, Google AdWords, which is generally used as an advertising method for driving sales. Google AdWords don't help us drive retention, and so it's a poor fit. Greg actually worked recently with a CEO of a software consultancy, and they had this conversation about the client was saying, well, my marketing isn't working, and my guys haven't been doing a good job, and I need to replace them. What can we do? I've been paying for SEO for the last year, and I'm not happy. And so Greg goes and pops open the hood, and he looks at all of the analytics, looks at what's going on from a search engine metrics standpoint, and he says, well, actually, it looks like these guys have been doing a pretty competent job. Your SEO is growing. What's the real problem? He says, well, I'm not getting any sales because of it. And the reason, then there's a really good reason for that. Search engine optimization isn't really designed for that anymore in today's version of Google. It's very difficult for a lot of businesses to drive sales based on search engine optimization. And so we had an individual that wasn't getting a bad service, but they felt like they were getting a bad service because their expectations weren't being managed, and they had misaligned the outcome that they were looking for with tactics that don't serve that goal. And so different objectives obviously require different key results. Different key results are going to be designed to drive different outcomes, and different outcomes will require different tactics. And so this is where we were saying that if you plan really well, the tactical part takes care of itself, because we know the things that we have to do, because the objective that we're trying to reach and that goal is just so well defined.
Basically, every tool ends up having a job that it excels at. And so when you're working your marketing plan, and by the way, this is a really fun, huge one-page version of a marketing plan that Eric developed. But we're zooming in on the one part that we've had time to discuss today, which is the quarterly initiatives and the outcomes based on the 4 things that we said marketing can do. You always want to end up aligning your tactics with your expectations of success and make sure that they're directly serving at least one of your objectives. So this is also probably a good time to start grooming some of those extraneous and frivolous tactics that are often thrown into marketing plans, often with good intention to be experimental, to try new things, to see if there's maybe opportunities in different mediums and formats and communication styles. That's the time to start grooming this if it's not been performing.
Okay. We're running a little bit short on time, and we're gonna try to wrap and go into Q&A as close to 11 as possible. But we're gonna go and talk about budgeting for the next 5 minutes, and then we can talk more about it during Q&A.
Yeah, so the last thing we're going to discuss is this effective budgeting. Most of us know 2 things about the marketing budget. which is that number one, we really don't know how to properly create a marketing budget. And then two, we're pretty sure the marketing folks that are driving this budget are always asking for too much. We're about to make the marketing budget process and try to remove the subjectivity, just like we've done in other components of this. In terms of trying to figure out a marketing budget, the easy thing that a lot of people do is they try to express it as a percentage of their total revenues. So basically, how much do I need to be spending relative to how much I make? And there's not necessarily a best practice from that standpoint, but we can give you a range that most firms end up spending, which is somewhere between 8 and 15% of revenue, depending upon the size and type of business that you run. There are a lot of reasons for this huge delta, but basically it's inclusive of B2B, B2C, and all those different industries that run on different types of margins, which is why our lifetime value takes that into account. So we could give you a general area, and many businesses, the small businesses that we work with, are often falling short of that lowest mark of 8%. So most businesses really that we end up talking to, one of their major problems is that they aren't spending enough to actually create the house and structure necessary to run a full-blown marketing process. So, and those people will always get beat or outcompeted by businesses that are able to carve out that budget, because that budget is used for making their growth more efficient. So the 8 to 15% isn't the best guideline, but it is something that you could use to check yourself. So here is a scale getting back to the lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. We have it very kind of subjectively laid out, and we know that the sweet spot is the 3 to 4 to 1 area. But then there's also, 3 to 4 can be a big difference. And so if your business is aligned to be very profitable, very scalable, then you want to be running closer to the 4. And then if your business is less scalable, then it's going to be closer to the 3. So if your goal is growth, and that is going to cost some amount of time, money, and resources, and you're underspending, then you really need to realign what your expectations for growth are, and then make it a little more objective. And so let's get back to the mountain again. So since we have to climb this hill every time we make a sale, it means we need to express the cost of acquisition as the cost of one trip up a hill. And that first acquisition is always going to be the most expensive, because you've only done it once. So you're dividing by 1. So what all those costs that went into that first sale is basically what it cost you for that first acquisition. And sales tend to get cheaper throughout the early stages of any sale and marketing program. As we learn things, gather feedback, we create efficiencies, and they start to normalize. We start to get a flow. But when we're budgeting in that discussion and we're calculating a target CAC by taking our lifetime value and dividing it by some sort of ratio, then an example of that would be $160,000. If I'm going to get that much as an expectation from a client in gross margin, then I'm going to be targeting somewhere around $40K to acquire that client. And this is the area, again, where a lot of businesses are often underspending because they have unreasonable expectations of how much it costs to generate $160,000 in gross profit. So if you want 10 new customers to get to the top of this hill, that's going to cost $400,000 to get done, because you're just multiplying that $40,000 acquisition cost, which is running a quarter of that $160,000 in gross profit, and multiplying it by 10. So just keep in mind that this isn't an advertising budget alone. This is the full budget for acquiring a customer. So that includes your cost of sales, salary, commission, bonuses, all that stuff. And so using a more holistic accounting of how much costs are going into it will help all businesses understand how much this actually costs, because I think marketing is often a separate budget. And so people have a hard time working with just a media budget or whatever. But when you throw it all into one bucket under the cost of an acquisition, you begin to see how essentially inefficient sales alone are. And so if you could lower that acquisition cost, then you could drive a lot more people up that hill and get way more bang for your buck. And that's really where marketing shines. Eric, I think you could go on to the next one.
Yeah.
So I'm just cutting it a little short.
Cutting it a little, we short. We'll hit it at the. We'll hit more during questions.
You've heard a lot about lifetime value and customer acquisition costs. Now, customer acquisition costs, easy to calculate. Honestly, you just throw a bunch of things in a bucket, add it all up. Lifetime value, this is where it gets a little hard. There is some modeling involved, but we made a calculator on our website to help come up with a ballpark area for businesses so that they could start there. Often the lifetime value is the harder to calculate of the two. And so this calculator should take some of that time and energy out of that process and give you a ballpark area of where you should probably be in terms of how valuable your clients are. And then that makes it very easy to back into an acquisition costs relative to that lifetime value.
And this is for information only. We're not gathering any email addresses. No one's going to call you up and say, you know, hey, this is Astound. We saw your marketing budget and we'd really like to talk to you about that. There's none of that. This is just for your own information.
Absolutely.
So, wrapping up, marketing is definitely misunderstood. Sales is very often easy to measure. Marketing tends to be less so because we don't decide typically at the start of the process what we're actually going to measure and how we're going to reach those results. The OKR structure helps with that. The budgeting structure helps with that. We've got the most famous quote in advertising and marketing was, what was this guy's name? John Wanamaker. He owned a department store like 150 years ago almost. And he said, well, I know I'm blowing half of my marketing budget. I just don't know which half. That's a frustration that still exists, even in a time where we have digital tools and better analytics and all that stuff. Marketing has really two jobs here: to help sales scale by decreasing the cost per acquisition, and helping operations increase margins by increasing lifetime value. So, on that note, we're going to open it up for questions, and I am going to unmute everybody. And if you need to be muted, just push the little microphone button and on your